Imagine stepping back in time over 3,500 years ago to a world where bronze glittered under the sun and the thunder of chariot wheels shook the very earth. This isn't a fantasy tale. It's the story of the Shang dynasty, China's first confirmed kingdom and the blueprint for an empire. Around 1600 BCE, while civilizations like Egypt and Babylon were flourishing in the west, a new power was rising in the east, along the fertile banks of the Yellow River. This was the birth of the Shang, a dynasty that would not only unite a region but also forge an identity that echoes through to the present day. Before them, there were legends of the Xia dynasty, but the Shang are the first to step out of the mists of myth and into the solid record of history. They left behind irrefutable proof of their existence. Sprawling cities, magnificent tombs, and a revolutionary technology that would change the face of warfare forever. What was this game-changing technology? Bronze. The Shang weren't the first to discover it, but they were the first to perfect it on an industrial scale. Their artisans were masters, transforming a simple mix of copper and tin into something extraordinary. They cast intricate ritual vessels, elaborate bells, and, most importantly, weapons of unparalleled sharpness and durability. Bronze-tipped spears, bronze-headed axes, and bronze helmets gave Shang warriors a terrifying advantage over their rivals, who were still fighting with stone and wood. But metal alone doesn't win an empire. You need speed, you need shock, and you need awe. The Shang found all three in the war chariot. Picture this: a light, two-wheeled cart pulled by a pair of specially trained horses, carrying a driver, an archer, and a soldier armed with a spear. These were the tanks of the ancient world. They could smash through enemy lines, chase down fleeing soldiers, and provide a mobile platform for raining down arrows. The combination of bronze weaponry and fast, deadly chariots was unstoppable. It was this military machine that allowed a small group of people to conquer neighbors and build the first true empire in Chinese history. At the heart of this sprawling kingdom were the Shang kings. These weren't just political leaders. They were seen as semi-divine figures, the sons of heaven who held absolute power. They ruled from massive, fortified cities, the greatest of which was Anyang, their final capital. These cities were marvels of organization. A central palace complex housed the king and the royal court, surrounded by workshops for craftsmen, residential areas for commoners, and vast cemeteries for the elite. The king stood at the pinnacle of a highly structured society. He commanded armies, directed massive public works, projects like building walls and digging canals, and controlled the agricultural surplus that fed his people. Below him were the nobles, who often served as generals and governors, owning land and commanding their own troops. Then came the craftsmen, the farmers who formed the backbone of the economy, and at the very bottom, prisoners of war who were often used for labor or, in some grim ceremonies, as human sacrifices. This rigid hierarchy ensured that everyone knew their place and that the king's orders were carried out across his vast domain. But how did the king make his most critical decisions? How did he know when to go to war, when to plant crops, or if a royal hunt would be successful? He asked the spirits. This brings us to one of the most fascinating discoveries from the Shang era: oracle bones. Imagine a Shang priest taking a turtle shell or the shoulder blade of an ox. He carefully carves a question onto its surface, a question from the king. Will we be victorious in the upcoming battle against the Fang tribe? Or will the queen's child be a son? Then he applies a hot poker to the bone, causing it to crack. The priest, a skilled diviner, would then interpret the pattern of these cracks to reveal the answer from the ancestors and gods. What's truly incredible is that after the ceremony, they would often inscribe the date, the question, the prediction, and sometimes even the outcome right onto the bone itself. These oracle bones are more than just fortune-telling tools. They are the earliest form of Chinese writing we have ever found. They are direct, personal messages from a world that vanished thousands of years ago. They are the world's first recorded questions, a library of the hopes, fears, and daily concerns of the Shang kings. Reading them is like listening to the heart of the dynasty beat. With their spiritual guidance secured and their military might established, the Shang expanded. Their armies, famed for their discipline and strength, became a force of nature. Inscriptions boast of campaigns involving thousands of soldiers, but the true symbol of their power was the chariot force. They were known as the Empire of 10,000 Chariots, a number that may have been an exaggeration, but perfectly captured their reputation. Elite chariot units formed the vanguard, a thunderous wave of wood, bronze, and horseflesh that struck terror into the hearts of their enemies. Led by kings and nobles who fought from their own chariots, the Shang army carved out an empire that stretched across the North China Plain, demanding tribute and allegiance from dozens of surrounding tribes. Life within this empire was surprisingly advanced. The majority of people were farmers, living in villages and working the fields. They cultivated millet, wheat, and rice, and their harvests fed the cities and fueled the military machine. In the urban centers, a class of skilled artisans flourished. They weren't just making weapons. They were creating some of the most beautiful bronze objects the world has ever seen. These vessels, covered in intricate designs of mythical animals and geometric patterns, were used in important rituals to honor the ancestors. Their craftsmanship was so sophisticated that for centuries, people believed they must have been made by a later dynasty. We now know they were the work of Shang masters. For the nobility, life was one of privilege. They lived in large timber-framed houses, wore fine silk clothing, and feasted from bronze dishes. One of their favorite pastimes was hunting, often conducted from chariots, pursuing deer, boar, and even tigers in the royal parks. This wasn't just for sport. It was also military training, keeping them sharp and ready for war. The richness of their culture is evident in their tombs, which were filled with chariots, weapons, bronze vessels, jade carvings, and tragically the remains of servants and guards sacrificed to accompany their masters into the afterlife. This practice of sacrifice points to the very core of Shang belief, the immense power of ancestors and spirits. The Shang believed the world was teeming with spirits gods of the wind, the river, the earth, and a supreme deity named Shangdi. But most important were the spirits of their own royal ancestors. They believed these ancestors continued to guide and influence the world of the living. They could bring victory in battle, ensure a good harvest, or inflict terrible disasters if they were displeased. The king's most crucial role was to act as the chief priest, the sole intermediary between the living world and the spirit realm. Through elaborate rituals involving music, dance, and offerings of food, wine, and sacrifices, the king communicated with his ancestors, seeking their guidance and appeasing their will. This spiritual authority was the ultimate source of his political power. He didn't just rule by force. He ruled with a divine mandate passed down through his lineage. But as with all great empires, the seeds of decline were sown within its success. After centuries of rule, cracks began to appear. Later, Shang kings became complacent, indulging in extreme luxury and neglecting their duties. Stories recorded by later historians speak of rampant corruption, decadent parties, and increasingly cruel punishments. The state's demand for resources to build palaces, supply the army, and craft elaborate bronzes placed a heavy burden on the common people through taxes and forced labor. Discontent began to simmer throughout the kingdom. While the Shang weakened from within, a new power was growing on their western frontier. A former vassal state known as the Zhou watched and learned. They adopted Shang technology, like bronze making, chariot warfare, but they also offered a different style of leadership. The Zhou rulers presented themselves as virtuous and just, a stark contrast to the perceived tyranny of the final Shang king. Around 1046 BCE, the breaking point was reached. The Zhou army, led by King Wu, marched east to confront the Shang. The two massive armies clashed at the legendary Battle of Mai. According to the histories, the Shang army was vast but demoralized. Many of its soldiers, resentful of their corrupt king, turned their spears around and joined the Zhou. The last Shang king, seeing his empire crumble before his eyes, retreated to his palace, adorned himself in his finest jewels, and walked into the flames, bringing the dynasty to a fiery end. The fall of the Shang was not the end of their story. The Zhou, as the new rulers, inherited the vast cultural and technological legacy the Shang had built. They adopted the Shang system of writing, which would evolve over millennia into the Chinese characters used today. They continued the traditions of ancestor worship and bronze casting, although with their own unique style. The military tactics, the political structures, the entire concept of a unified kingdom under a single ruler, all of this was passed down from the Shang. The empire of 10,000 chariots may have fallen, but its spirit never died. It laid the foundation upon which 3,000 years of Chinese civilization would be built. Every time you see Chinese calligraphy, you're seeing the distant echo of a question carved into an oracle bone. The Shang were the pioneers, the architects of a legacy written in bronze and bone, a legacy that has profoundly shaped one of the world's oldest continuous civilizations. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories from history. See you next time.